The Chemical Engineering Lab G403 is known as Mass Transfer Operations. It is situated on the ground floor in the John Orr Building Atrium C. Before entering the lab, all mandatory safety signs are displayed at the door to inform students and staff of what is and not allowed in the laboratory. Personal protective equipment, which is required in the laboratory, includes a lab coat, safety goggles, closed shoes, and gloves. Eating, smoking, and/or drinking is prohibited in this lab. Only authorized staff members and students are allowed in this laboratory. That is chemical engineering technical and academic staff, and only scheduled chemical engineering students conducting practicals can enter this laboratory. You will not be allowed to enter the laboratory if you are not wearing closed shoes, lab coat, and safety goggles. No smoking is allowed in the laboratory, as there could be areas containing considerable quantities of flammable substances which could cause fire. As part of compliance with government protocols and university health and safety policies, it has become mandatory that COVID-19 compliance signs be displayed at the door. Everyone entering our laboratories is required to wear a face mask which covers both the mouth and nose to adhere to the COVID-19 regulations. A lab coat and closed shoes is mandatory, while safety goggles are required for certain practicals. Each lab is equipped with a 70% alcohol sanitizer at the entrance to ensure everyone sanitizes their hands before entering the lab. As part of complying with the University Occupational Health and Safety protocols, an evacuation poster is displayed at the door to guide staff and students of evacuation procedures during an emergency. The name and contact details of the campus safety practitioner are also attached in case of need. It is mandatory that laboratories be equipped with a fire extinguisher in case of fire, and the pressure gauge must at all times be maintained to be in the green prescribed section. The laboratory is equipped with a first aid box containing all first aid basics as per the occupational safety checklist, including antiseptic solution, which is expiring in April 2022. It is very important to make sure the solution has not expired. Only trained and authorized staff members are allowed to open the first aid box, and their names are displayed above the first aid box. Procedure on how to perform first aid cardiopulmonary resuscitation, commonly known as CPR, is displayed next to the first aid box to remind first aider in case of emergency. Additionally, names and contact details of UJ DFC emergencies are displayed. To ensure and to avoid hazardous waste materials mixing with general waste and liquid poured into the drains, there is waste contaminated bins with hazardous chemical substance bins with a list of contaminated waste to be disposed. Organic waste drum, and only an authorized company empties those bins for proper disposal. The safety shower signs indicates the location of the safety shower and eye washer stations, since all laboratories are equipped with safety showers and eye washer stations with effective water pressure for on-the-spot decontamination to allow staff and students to flush away hazardous substances that can cause injury. As part of health and safety protocols, all laboratories are designed with an emergency exit point with visible signs which must remain open at all times when staff and students are working in the laboratories in case of emergency, which could prevent them from accessing the main entrance. As the nature of chemical engineering processes, some practicals and experiments could emit some toxic fumes which could be harmful. Therefore, all laboratories are equipped with gas detectors which monitors levels of potential gases in the atmosphere. When the gases go over the prescribed limits, the gas detector alarm goes off and all students and staff must evacuate that facility immediately. To distinguish and for ease of identification, all chemical engineering technical staff, including lab assistants, must wear lab coats marked chemical engineering research. All the laboratories are properly maintained and nicely painted with effective lighting to ensure good visibility, and the equipment are all situated beyond the prescribed yellow line with sufficient space between equipments when students are conducting practicals to avoid overcrowding and groups concentrated in one area. Technical staff, which includes lab assistants, are housed in some of the laboratories to ensure students have easy access during consultations. The office cubicle contains a glass window for technical staff to have clear visibility of the lab. This is a membrane filtration pilot plant which is widely applied in separation processes to remove suspended solid materials and solutes from water. Applications vary between small, residential systems for drinking water to industrial plants. This equipment trains students to determine the resistance of the ultrafiltration and nanofiltration membranes. Distillation is a unit operation involving the conversion of a liquid into vapor that is subsequently condensed back to liquid form. Distillation can be divided into a small laboratory scale and a large industrial distillation. The continuous distillation apparatus in chemical engineering department demonstrates the recovery of 95% methanol distillate from a 50% feed solution as it aims to investigate and develop an understanding of a multi-stage continuous distillation at atmospheric pressure for students. Single effect evaporator. The thin film evaporator consists of a cylindrical tube provided with a steam heating jacket and with a 3-blade inner rotor that provides a very thin film of liquid in the inner walls of the tube. The solution having to be concentrated is transferred from the feed tank to the evaporator by means of a metering pump. The vaporized solvent condensed in a shell and tube condenser and it is collected into a vessel. This type of evaporator is widely used in the industries for concentrating thermosensitive viscous products and in the food and beverage industries like sugar, fruit juices, and enzyme. The objective of the experiment is to study, operate, and obtain characteristics to perform material and energy balances and also to determine steam economy, which denotes the performance of a single effect evaporator. Corrosion Study Unit aims to illustrate the principles and practical aspects of corrosion and its prevention and to introduce students to techniques for measuring and preventing corrosion. The following objectives are usually investigated. Effects of salinity on metal corrosion rate. Effect of dissolved oxygen concentration on metal corrosion rate. Cathodic protection using both sacrificial anode and impressed current approaches. Gas absorption practical exposes and trains students in determining carbon dioxide composition in various streams around the column and evaluate absorption efficiency. Students are then required to discuss the effect of varied liquid flow rates on pressure drop and the absorbed carbon dioxide liquid outlet stream. Reaction kinetics. Biodiesel production practical is conducted in AMAR equipment, high pressure autoclave or reactor, which aims to provide students with a practical knowledge in chemical reaction engineering through biodiesel synthesis with a heterogeneous catalyst, covering the following objectives of investigating the effect of temperature and reaction time on biodiesel conversion and product selectivity, determining the rate of reaction and apparent activation energy. The experiment is conducted inside a fume hood equipped with an extraction system as it involves high pressure and temperature which could result in emissions which could be harmful. Continuous evaporative crystallization experiment is a practical which seeks to determine the salt recovery from a diluted sodium sulfate solution which is concentrated using solvent evaporation crystallization. During lab demonstrations, the technical lab assistants demonstrate the operation of the equipment and processes it entails before students can commence with the practicals. Each student is assigned a task to ensure all students partake in the practical. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all students and technical staff are required to wear face masks even during practicals. After the technical lab assistant has explained and demonstrated operation of the equipment and all the objectives involved and outcomes required from the students are explained, he or she takes a step back and allows students to operate the equipment themselves under supervision to ensure students are following the correct procedure as prescribed in the practical manuals. The lab assistant does not conduct the practical on behalf of the students. He or she explains the operation and steps back, and the students take over the operation following the procedure outlined in the practical manual, including collecting samples and analyzing them. Another set of chemical engineering laboratories 6218 and 6219 are situated on the 6th floor of the John Orr building at the Doornfontein campus, which houses reaction kinetics, process control PIV systems, fluid flow and heat transfer processes. Fluid dynamics equipment, which requires compressed air, which is generated from a portable compressor, and the single-stage air compressor equipment are located in the 6th floor laboratories, and both equipment produces a lot of noise, and as such, everyone working in this laboratory is required to wear earplugs when the said equipment are in operation. As with all other laboratories, safety signs showing the required PPE are displayed at the entrance of the lab, including the yellow sign warning of rotating parts in the laboratory. Everyone entering the laboratory must sanitize their hands using the hand sanitizer stand placed at the entrance, equipped with 70% alcohol sanitizer. The equipment are placed beyond the safety yellow line with enough and sufficient space between equipments. The lab is equipped with an 8-seater table in the middle to be used by students for their pre-practical assessment and briefing by the lab assistant before and after practicals. Procedures in case of fire emergency and evacuation are also displayed at the entrance, including name and contact details of campus safety practitioner and all other emergency names and contact details. It's very important to ensure that the fire extinguishers are maintained to ensure the pressure gauge is always in the correct green gauge. The fire extinguisher sign is displayed just above the fire extinguisher, and the same for first aid box and sign. Only trained and authorized staff can operate the fire extinguisher or open the first aid box. The contents of the first aid box must include the antiseptic solution, which has not expired, as it can be seen on the ones in chemical engineering first aid boxes, which is expiring in April 2022. The first aid box must be tightly closed after use. The laboratory on the 6th floor is also equipped with a safety shower and eye washer station with the necessary signs clearly displayed to show their location. The water supplied must have enough water pressure. After each practical demonstration, the students are required to clean when they are done, as housekeeping is another part of the outcomes during practicals. Technical lab assistants clean the laboratories to ensure it's always neat, and now with COVID-19, after practicals, the equipment must be decontaminated using disinfecting wipes before another group commences with practicals. All the waste used during the decontamination are placed in a special COVID-19 used waste PPE bin. The laboratory is fitted with fume hoods connected to an extraction system for students to prepare the consumables with storage cabinets underneath. Centrifugal pump brake exposes students to operation of pumps in series and in parallel, and determining the total head, pump efficiency, and the overall efficiency. Refrigeration practical aims to study the thermodynamic relationship that expansion has on the work and the refrigeration coefficient of performance, and to investigate the thermodynamics relationships of the refrigerant R134A tetrafluoroethane with varying expansion stages in order to develop a conclusive theory on how expansion is related to the work done by the compressor, and to determine the refrigeration coefficient of performance of the refrigeration cycle for the different expansion stages. Fixed and fluidized bed practicals aims to equip students with the practical experience in the flow of fluids through granular beds in both fixed and fluidized modes by determining the minimum fluidization velocity, observing and identifying fluidization modes, which are particulate versus aggregative. Single-stage air compression aims to study the compressor characteristics such as volumetric efficiency, isothermal efficiency, brake horsepower, and pressure ratio, and to investigate the effect of compressor outlet pressure on the aforementioned parameters. Gas diffusion coefficient apparatus is a practical exposing and training students to determine the coefficient of a gas by evaporation from a liquid surface. The process control practical aims to demonstrate the operation of batch control in heating process and the operation of an on and off temperature control. Fluid dynamic equipment equips students with skills and knowledge to determine the energy losses across various fittings and pipe sizes for non-compressible fluid only, and resistance coefficient values of typical fitting, to measure velocities and corresponding pressure losses in a pipe and plot these tests, and determining pipe friction and the wall friction. The heat exchange equipment is fitted with 3 heat exchangers, namely double pipe, shell and tube and flat plate. It aims to train students on how to determine internal convective heat transfer coefficient and verifies if it falls within acceptable range, and trains students on how to work with empirical correlations as well as dimensionless numbers. Hot water is transported through the black insulated pipes to prevent heat loss or gain to the environment. The water filtration pilot plant is used to evaluate the performance of 2 different filter media in turbidity removal from fortified municipal water. The filter media contained inside the unit includes different particle sizes or grades of sand and activated carbon. The coagulation and decantation unit demonstrates the effectiveness of various coagulants and flocculants in removal of suspended particles from water. Fluid mixing apparatus provides students with an experience in the mechanics of mixing by investigating the effects of various impellers and fluid parameters. Cooling tower aims to investigate the effect of different heat loads on the wet bulb temperature approach. In a drought-forcing cooling tower, cooling towers are specialized heat exchangers in which air and water are brought into direct contact with each other in order to reduce the water's temperature. Typical examples are seen in most of Eskom's power stations. Liquid diffusion coefficient exposes and trains students to skills needed to determine the liquid diffusion coefficient of sodium chloride solution, distilled or deionized water. As previously outlined, chemical engineering technical staff wears black lab coats marked chemical engineering research for ease of identification during practicals. The students must operate the equipment themselves with the guidance and supervision of the technical lab assistant. That includes the closing and opening of valves to regulate and set the required flow rates. The technical staff member allows students to ask questions during the practicals in case they need some clarity. Students must write down the experimental data on the spot while the equipment is running, and the lab assistant makes sure the correct data is recorded by the students. It's very important for the technical lab assistant to point at the equipment as he or she explains so students can identify the parts as taught in theory.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.